Hi everyone, welcome back to edX Pixel Expo 8 monthly webinar global webcast September series, an event that happens every 8th of the month where we'll come together to, for a united cause, which is our love for diving and also the ocean. So I hope you enjoyed the previous session that we had, which is a conversation with the masters of underwater photography, Pixel 101 with Tim Ho and also Zina Holloway, and hosted by Adam Hanlon. So for this session, we are going to be talking, we are going to get into the shop talk with Richard Nicholls. But before that, let me just introduce the moderator of this session. He is none other than David Strike. He comes with a background in military, commercial, scientific, and technical diving. David is a Australian based and is a former field editor of Asian Diver magazine and also the recipient of several industry recognition awards and a fellow of the Explorers Club of New York and ADEX ambassador for technical diving. And of course, our special guest for today is Richard Nicholls. He is a dive owner, former equipment wholesaler, and underwater videographer, Australian-based as well. Richard is a party course director and one of the handful of pioneers who helped popularize the recreational use of nitrox, SCRs, and technical mixed gas diving in Australia in the early 90s. So without any further ado, let me just hand over this session to David Strike. David, over to you.
Nora, thank you. So, Richard, good evening. It's interesting to chat to you when you're sort of, for want of a better term, just down the road. And Richard's a person that I see fairly often, usually in the water in more normal times. So welcome. It's good to see you. So
thanks, Strikey. My pleasure.
Well, I'm sure it is.
Yes, absolutely.
So, I should say as well, over the years, Richard and I have enjoyed quite an interesting sort of relationship with one or two very humorous adventures that we've shared together. But let's start right at the very beginning. For the benefit of those that don't know Richard, he's been driven by two passions in his life. I should say three. I'll include Janet in that as well. But the two other passions in Richard's life are diving, of course, which is one of them. But his second passion is golf. And indeed, that's how you actually started when you left school, wasn't it, Richard?
That's right, yes. I left school at 17 and I started a golf apprenticeship. So I signed up with the British PGA and I started my apprenticeship at a seaside town called Frinton-on-Sea at a golf club, strangely enough, called Frinton Golf Club.
Right. And how long were you there for?
My apprenticeship took 5 years. It was a very, very comprehensive apprenticeship in those days. And partway through that, my sister emigrated to Australia and then my parents emigrated to Australia. I stayed on to finish my golf apprenticeship and then lo and behold, I left too.
Well, now I'm fascinated. What's involved in a golf apprenticeship?
Well, it was interesting because we learned a whole raft of skills. Golf was obviously one. And at the end of the apprenticeship, there was a golf playing test. So there was a group of 120 people basically played off for 20 spots. And the top 20 got successfully passed their exams, their playing exam, and then those that didn't came back the following year. So that was probably the most pressurized bit of golf that I did. But I learned all aspects of the whole golf business. So we learned how to teach people to play golf, how to repair golf clubs, how to run and merchandise a golf pro shop, how to organise golf competitions, etc., etc. So it was actually quite a well-rounded, sort of business activity, as well as hitting balls into rivers, streams, and bushes, which I was good at.
So you gave up the good life in Frinton-on-Sea and came to Australia.
It was, and indeed it was a good life, but I can remember standing on the practice ground in January, hitting golf balls into this easterly wind that basically come directly from Russia, freezing cold, 2 lots of waterproofs on, a beanie and a balaclava and a beanie and my golf gloves, hitting these balls which felt with a club made of steel and a ball made of ice. It was just horrendous, and I thought, there's got to be more to life than this. So fortunately then I was able to apply for some jobs in Australia, and I got an interview with Manly Golf Club, which at the time was conducted by the telephone. You can remember international phones in those days with the delay and all that sort of stuff. And they said, look, if you get here, we're prepared to give you a start, so come on out. Happy days.
And your family were living in this area then?
Correct. Yeah, they were at the time living in Clontarf, which is just around the corner from here in Manly. When I got here, I had a look at the pro shop, had a look at the club. It was a super swanky, luxurious club. My dad was a member there. I went in and talked to the golf pro there, Roger Riddle. And it became obvious to me from the very moment I started talking to him that he had no idea that I was potentially here to take his job. So pretty much I had my interview. They said, yep, this is all okay. Should you want the job? And I said, well, actually, I don't want the job. I think you should, keep with your pro, support him, and I'll go and find another job. So I ended up getting a job with the head of the Australian PGA called Jeff Scott at Narrabeen Golf Range. So I worked at the golf range when I first got here. Fantastic it was.
And of course, your golf was really sort of very, very good. And I'm going to jump forward here because in years later, of course, you actually represented Australia, didn't you, in the business?
I did, yes, in the World Corporate Golf Challenge. Sadly, we didn't win. Those bunch of burglars from the US won, but I think we won in every other way. Apart from coming second, we were definitely the most popular, and our little stick-on kangaroos were traded for very, very expensive bits of golf. How many
of you? There were 4 of you, weren't there?
Correct. Yeah.
And I seem to recall you weren't at that stage an actual Australian, so you had to become naturalised. And I remember coming along to your naturalisation ceremony.
No, that's right, because people that know me know that when it comes to admin and things like that, I'm completely useless. So I had filled out the forms, but I've been a permanent resident at that point for 16 years and probably filled out the forms 4 times and then not done it. So Janet actually said, well, you can't go as a permanent resident. So if you want to go, you better sign up here. So, of course, I did.
Yeah, it must have been one of the quickest naturalisation ceremonies on record.
It was. I seem to remember there was Janet, myself, you, and Sue Sacker, the mayor.
And the mayor just sort of rushed in, muttered the words, and rushed out again. And immediately you'd been tapped on the shoulder and were Australian. Correct.
Yeah. Oh no, where was my tree? Damn it! Yeah, where was my little tree and my lamingtons?
Mate, so sorry, heading back now. So here you are in Australia. When did you get involved in diving?
Well, originally I got involved in diving in the UK through my uncle, who is a very famous commercial diver. He had a son and 3 daughters, and I had 3 sisters. His son wasn't at all interested in scuba diving, and obviously none of the girls were interested in scuba diving in those days. Sorry to prickle the Rosemary Lunn if she's listening in. But so he actually taught me to dive, and it was quite an extraordinary experience because my first dive was in a gravel pit in Thorpe Soken, and so was my second dive. And my second dive, I'll always remember, it was like to 40 metres, and we got down to the bottom of the gravel pit, and there was part of what was like a loading bay. We went inside that, into the corner. Uncle David pulled his regulator out, purged it. We went into this tiny little air bubble. Chat, regulator back in, up we came. He obviously, held me while we did our stops, and up we came to the surface. And I thought, wow, this is quite cool, even though I was completely barking mad because we could see nothing. I think I saw a roach at one point about 1 inch long that frightened the life out of me. So when I came to Australia, it was, of course, the Valhalla, diving galore. Amazing.
So where did you start?
Well, I started originally Uncle David taught me, and then I very briefly joined a BZAC club. That didn't go so well for me, really. I didn't really fit in. And I think really they only really wanted me there so they could get access to some of these wrecks off Harwich that were protected by the Royal Navy and the Ministry of Defence, because David was responsible for removing ordnance and things off those. So I think they thought through me maybe that they'd be able to have access to those. So I didn't really fit in. So I didn't do a great deal of diving. And when I came to Australia, started working at the golf range, Jeff and I ran that business so hard. So mainly most of my dives were night dives in the early days. Night dives at Shelley Beach, Gasworks, Fairlight. But I just loved it.
Right. And so when did you make the move into full-time diving?
Well, it's an oft-used expression, but people talk about being burnt out. But at that time, I was doing a phenomenal amount of golf. We were doing 100 lessons a week. So 50 hours training with people a week, plus getting up early, running the range, managing it, doing all the other stuff. So working phenomenal hours. I had almost no time off in the first, 2.5 years I was there. I did actually go to Fremantle for the Defence of the Americas Cup, which is very exciting. I had a week off in WA. But that was pretty much it. So I eventually decided that I needed a break. I'd never seen Australia. I had a 4-wheel drive. I thought I'll do the Leyland Brothers, 6 months off, travel around Australia, get that out of my system, come back and do more golf. And one of the ladies that I was teaching, her husband was in charge of putting concessions on cruise liners. So she said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm just going to travel around Australia in my 4-wheel drive for 6 months, come back, and then I'll pick up golf again." And she said, "Oh, well, would you like to, work on a cruise ship doing your snorkeling and diving?" And I said, "Really?" She said, "Yeah." She said, "We need someone to organise snorkeling for the customers. And if you want to do any diving when you're in the ports as well, you could do that." She said, "It's a 6-month gig. If you want to do it, you won't get paid, but you get a free cabin, etc., etc." And then I thought, cruise ships, the home for the overfed and the nearly dead. Do I really want to do this? And then she said the magic words. They're all Contiki cruises, 18 to 35s. So I went, yeah, sign me up. So actually myself and a good friend of mine who was just got long service leave from Flick, the pest control company, he came on board with me and off we went. And it was amazing. And that time I was a PADI dive master, but not a PADI instructor. So we had our own unique way of training people. So we used to teach them in the classroom and in the pool on board the ship. And then when we got to the ports, the instructors there used to do their own water dives and certify them.
Right.
Worked pretty well till we got found out.
And where were you travelling? Where were the cruises?
We're travelling around the South Pacific. It was amazing. It was like a 9-day cruise. So Fiji, Vanuatu, sometimes we went to the Solomons. We also, on quite a few cruises, went to Santo, Espiritu Santo in Vanuatu. And we actually, instead of going to Champagne Bay like the Fairstar did, we actually went to the main wharf at Santo. So for the poor guests, it was a disaster, this crappy old copra town. And then, an hour and a half in a bus overland to Champagne Bay. But obviously we were right next to the President Coolidge. So about every, probably I think every second cruise, so every 15 to 18 days, we were diving on the Coolidge. Amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
That would have been superb.
Yeah, it was fantastic. And we just did some fantastic diving. It was great fun. It was, I was 25 years old. It was a complete nutty experience.
And
Obviously,
sorry, so you weren't being paid for this. How did you live?
Well, what we did was on the first trip, we organised snorkeling tours, and they were so successful. But when we got to the ports, the operators didn't have enough snorkeling equipment. So when we went back, I went to the local dive shop in Manly, Manly Sports and Dive, and we bought 500 sets of masks, snorkel and fins. And so we used to hire them out right at the beginning of the trip, 20 bucks a set. They'd all go out. We'd organise the snorkeling tours. They'd all come back. And that was our income. And then we started doing scuba dives, dive courses and everything else.
So when you gave up the cruise ship, having ordered 500 sets, I imagine you were welcomed with open arms at the dive store.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and we paid for them up front too.
Right. Wow.
But it was interesting because we only, we hired them out once and basically they were paid for.
Yeah.
And then, we had 2 years of this till eventually the cruise company sussed out what we were up to. And then we had to have like a more formal arrangement. And then they wanted to take commission and everything else. It was at that point I went exit stage right. Because a guy called Dave Evans at Scuba Hire in Suva, so High Lorraine if you're out there, Scuba Hire in Suva just said to me, what are you doing when you leave the cruise ship? I said, I'm going back to golf. And he said, well, if you want to come and work here, perhaps you can. I said, well, I'll have a think about it. Got home, it's the middle of winter, I thought, working in Fiji sounds all right. So I went to work there for 2.5 years.
Right.
That
And
was
where you stayed with the same company in Fiji?
Yeah, so I worked for Scuba Hire pretty much for all that time. Right at the end, I did a couple of trips on the Pacific Nomad, a liveaboard dive boat there. I did, I think, 5 trips on that just from when I finished with Scuba Hire to when I went back to Australia. But it was an amazing job. My official title, I was the manager of the commercial diving and service division, which was amazing because the only skill I had associated with that grand title was a certificate from Aqualung saying I could sell their regulators.
And the 40-metre dive in a gravel pit.
Of course, yeah. Well, yes.
So when did you become an instructor, Richard?
In 1986, so halfway, 86, yeah. So halfway through the cruise ship thing. So in a break, the cruise ship went for 1 year. Then in a break, I thought I'd best get my instructor's ticket. So I did. Yeah, that was when Paddy was at Elizabeth Street in the city.
Right.
It was fantastic. It was a great experience. I think I was a bit of a rogue and a rascal, and I got told off by Nancy a few times for my apparent lack of effort. She said, even though you might find this easy, you still need to appear that you're trying. So, yes. I always remember at the end having the interview, and Nancy said, what do you want to do in diving? I said, I really want your job. Looks pretty good.
You wouldn't have said that. She was the evaluator on my rescue course.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. I mean, I've kept
and when you come out of the water, you take your fins off and throw them over your shoulder. And I had the big, heavy jet fins and took them off, threw it over my shoulder, and it whacked her in the side of the head and knocked her over. So she missed my amazing rescue because she was nearly unconscious. But yeah.
Probably was part of your successful strategy, that one, I think.
Oh, it was. It worked. It worked amazingly well. I passed, naturally.
Yes.
So what happened after Fiji? You came back to Australia and then
yes, I came back to Australia, straight back to the dive shop and worked there for about 3 months.
Right.
That's actually where I met my wife, Janet.
Right.
I taught her to scuba dive. But because there was very strict protocol in those days over instructors' behaviour or misbehaviour, should I say, sorry, Janet, if you're listening, should I say, I actually then had to resign my job.
Really?
Yes, yeah, there was a very strict rule, which I, in fact, had suggested right at the very beginning, that if instructors were going to, take instructing seriously and not think about, playing around with their students, then if they did, they'd need to resign. So in fact, I fell on my own sword.
Oh.
Well, I did get my own back because a year later, I came back and bought the dive shop and got my job back.
So when did you worked for Mike Ball at
Correct. That was in between. So I came back, obviously I had to resign. I went to work for Mike for a year, and then I came back to Sydney and then started the dive shop, which had sadly gone on hard times and gone broke. So I bought the dive shop and then started up again.
What were you doing with Mike Ball? You were what, trip director?
Well, actually, when I first went there, I'd got the job in Townsville as the training director to run all their paddy courses. But when I got there, it was like deja vu, because Mark, the training director, had no idea why I was there. He had no idea that I'd actually been given the job by Mike as the training director. So I was able to try and pretend I was going to take over and do the training. And then when it came to that moment, I was able to morph into a trip director. And then so I did trip directing on water sport. So that was out to the Yongala and the reef every week. And I did relief trip directing for Tui Murray when Tui wanted to come off the boat and spend time with Jenny when he was first married. And then I was in sports, so the outer Yongala and the outer Coral Sea. So, I mean, at that point, that was the most amazing diving in the world. It was extraordinary. It was a fantastic year.
Because I remember sort of fairly recently, you did your 500th dive on the Yongala. The record.
That's right.
For the benefit of those that are not familiar, will you just describe the Yongala, what it is?
The Yongala is an extraordinary dive site. On its day, you'll see more fish there than a whole week of reef diving. So basically, you've got the Australian coastline. So where it is, you've got a very shallow bit of coastline, mangrove swamp, and then you come out and the sea drops down to about 30 meters, but basically no coral reef. So you've just got a flat, sandy area for about 25 miles out to sea, and then you start getting the reef structure 25 to 30 miles offshore. In between those two things is the Yongala. So it's like an oasis in the middle of the desert. And it's quite extraordinary. It's like every fish you see there is on steroids. Everything you see is like twice the size of anything else. And there's literally tens of thousands of fish there. I mean, the whole wreck is just smothered in sea life. It's amazing.
When did it sink?
It's sunk now about 108, 109 years ago.
Right.
Yeah, it was seen at the time, I think, as Australia's greatest maritime disaster. It was the first ship in Australia to have radio. And because of that, there was some confusion how the radio worked. So it didn't realise that it was steaming into a cyclone. And it went down in a cyclone.
Whoa.
But it was quite famous because for a long time it was undiscovered. Yeah. So for I think 65 or 70 years it was totally undiscovered. Planes, a couple of Ansett airline pilots saw something they thought could be a shipwreck. People then went out from Townsville, threw a grappling line over the side with a hook, steamed up and down, and eventually they found it. And then, as we know, the rest is history. Mike Ball set up a shop in Townsville based on the Yongala and the whole thing. Amazing shipwreck.
And so did you stay on water sport or you moved around on the other vessels?
I was mainly on water sport, except for relief trip directing. So, once or twice a month, I'd jump on sport and go out to the Coral Sea. But really the Yongala and the local reefs were my backyard, particularly the Yongala.
Yeah. And so after that, you came back to Sydney and took over the dive shop.
Yes. And here I've been ever since.
And just for the benefit of those that might not be familiar, Richard's dive shop is, if you're ever visiting Sydney and you catch the ferry across to Manly, walk out of the ferry, straight up the road, just past the police station, and you'll find Richard's shop.
Conveniently located near the police station, some may say.
Yes. And not too far removed from pubs either.
No. Yes. What's a pub?
Oh,
Didn't we used to gather there once?
We did.
I remember pubs.
Once or twice. So the type of diving, because you were also getting very heavily into the deeper wreck diving around Sydney at the time, and this was well before for want of a better term, technical diving sort of really made itself known here. You were...
Yes, that's right. I got sort of my love of deeper diving actually in Fiji. There was a guy called Peter Frey who had a business, a black coral business, and occasionally he used to employ us to go and collect black coral from the depths. We'd bring it up, and then he'd cut the black coral and splice it into the coral in shallow depths, and there it grew. But apparently, because it came from the depths, it was really good to carve, and he made some most beautiful things out of this black coral. What I'm going to say now is going to appall the audience, but I remember seeing one thing he made, which was a chess set, and the black pieces were made out of black coral, and the white pieces were made out of whale's teeth. It's the most extraordinary thing I've ever seen. Yeah, it looks for chess sets, it just looks amazing. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, or presumably that was his own personal sort of thing, or...
Yeah, no, it was a business that he ran there, and he also had a tour business as well. Right. But yeah, that was really his thing. So we did loads and loads of very naughty deep air diving.
And when you say deep, how deep is deep? You know, my theory of deep is when I'm standing up on the seafloor and the water comes up to just above my nose, that's deep diving. But how deep was your deep diving?
Well, most of the black coral we collected was anywhere between 75 to between 95 to 100 meters.
Ah, right. Deep diving.
Well, in those days, you see, it wasn't so deep because the PADI manual said you could go to 90 meters or 300 feet on air. So it was all okay.
Sorry, the PADI manual. Which manual did you have?
The open water manual. The maximum depth for diving with pure O2 was 30 feet, and for air diving was 300 feet.
Right.
Yeah. So it was obviously all sanctioned.
Yes. No.
Yeah. We had the US Navy extreme air tables that we used to use as our guide for decompression. But it was strange diving. We just basically drop down, see the coral, hacksaw it off, and come straight up. So it was very short exposures.
What was the equipment you were using, Richard? Twins?
Well, for most of those, we had a single tank, and then we had a oxygen tank on the reef above us. So we go down on the single tank and then come and grab the O2 tank. And the O2 tank had a harness on it, so sometimes we just swap over and then swim around on the reef, breathing pure O2.
Yeah, never, presumably, all without any incidents.
Strange enough, yes, I know. It seems a bit far-fetched now and a bit strange to believe. And also the narcosis thing was also an unusual discussion because, we sort of took it in stages and gradually got more accustomed, I suppose, to having high levels of nitrogen. But when I look back at it now, I don't think I had any idea how zonked we were until I first started diving with mixed gas. Yeah. Even to the bit when I looked at my buddy once, David, and he was trying to saw off using the wrong side of the hacksaw.
Oh, right.
Yeah, that's when I realised. Up we go, buddy.
Good move.
But we only had very short exposures, 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes. We dropped down quick, bang, bang, bang. We didn't see anything. We'd come back up, swim around the reef at 60 feet and above.
So when you were back in Sydney, what sort of deep diving were you doing then here? Still on air, presumably.
Yes, so we're diving the wrecks off Long Reef, which obviously you're very familiar with, but the audience may not be. So there's a series of wrecks in the between sort of 42 to 50 meters, which are accessible just off Long Reef, and then there's a few deeper wrecks straight out from Sydney. So there's the Kookaburra, the Encounter, which is an old cruiser that was sunk for target practice, and actually a very interesting wreck called the Kopitai, which was a paddle steamer. So that sits in about 78 metres. Yeah. There's the Waniora down south, sits in about 65. So there's some great, there's a great selection of deeper dives.
And you were part of there was a group of you that would regularly dive these wrecks?
Yeah, we dived a lot, and then we started to hear about this strange gas called nitrox. And then we started researching a little bit more, mainly in those days by telephone and by talking to people. And then ultimately that led to Ed Betts coming over to Australia and training us in blending nitrox, mixing nitrox.
You'd best explain for the benefit of the people that may not be familiar with Ed.
Yeah, okay. So Ed's a lovely guy. The best way I suppose to describe him is fanatical about what he does. He's fanatical about nitrox. He looks very much like an Elvis Presley impersonator, and I mean that in the nicest possible way. He's got his dark black hair and lots of it. And he's a typical New Yorker. So he's very intense, very passionate. So he came over and, nitrox at that point was a bit of a black art. But we were keen to have nitrox, and we were even keener to have mixed gas. So that was the real.
And he was running he was running Andy at the time.
Yeah, American Nitrox Divers International. But at that point, there was also INTD, run by Tom Mount. And then shortly after that, probably 3 or 4 years after that, Brett Gilliam started up and Rob Palmer started up TDI.
Yeah.
But we had Bill Hamilton write some tables for us because Ed was telling us all about this diving that he was doing on the Andrew Doria. And it seemed like a pretty similar type of depth to some of the wrecks and things that we had. So we got some tables written, et cetera, et cetera. And off we went.
So, Bill Hamilton, cut your tables.
Yes.
Oh.
What
happened with Andy? So Ed came over and put you through your paces?
Yeah, we did all our training, and then we started running it as an agency here in Australia and in the South Pacific. Your good friend Bob Kaysen was running INTD at the same time, and he was very much focused in the Philippines, Singapore, Thailand. We were focused probably more in Oz and in New Zealand, and just basically trying to educate people on nitrox, which, if you can remember back, was an interesting time in Australia, especially given the level of regulations with work cover, etc., and all the fun and games associated with that.
Yeah, it was. It really was a very. It would be impossible now to believe the opposition to nitrox.
I know it's extraordinary. For example, when we went and did that, metamorphosis on the Great Barrier Reef,
1995.
Nitrox was banned.
Yeah,
I remember when we came ashore, there was, Chris Coxon was talking to me about, we could be prosecuted and basically go to jail and all sorts of stuff for using 40% nitrox. Who'd have thought? Yeah,
it was. It's still very, very difficult to grasp just how opposed so many very otherwise seemingly intelligent people were opposed to it.
I just remember the experience we had with Paddy in the early days.
Yeah.
When Aaron, I said, look, my instructors are going to dive on nitrox, and they insisted that the instructors all carry a pony bottle with air, so they could, if they needed to share with the students, they'd give them air rather than nitrox. I mean, if you think about that through, it just would seem ludicrous now. And ultimately, I suppose nitrox has become, their biggest selling specialty.
Yeah.
So, it's amazing how it's changed. It's just a normal gas. Yeah. But oh my God, I just remember those standards committees, particularly in Queensland. It was just, the things people were saying was just hard to believe, that they would think that divers would do all this stuff, as they'd be plunging to their death lemming-like over the walls in Queensland.
Interestingly, that metamorphosis trip, it was one of Michael Orr's leading it, wasn't it? The 24-hour or 48 hours on the life of a reef, wasn't it?
Yes, a 24-hour experience of the Temple of Doom, I seem to remember.
Yes.
And then he did a follow-up in the Maldives, and I was very fortunate that I got to go along to do all the nitrox stuff and also the rebreathers with, I think it was the Draeger Dolphin, I think it was the Atlantis rebreather at the time. Yeah. To organise all that, and that was a real opener. That was an expedition where everything that could possibly go wrong went wrong. It was extraordinary. We ended up, cobbling together from bits that we found around the boat to repair the partial pressure blending panels, things that only half arrived and bits were missing. And oh my God, it was a circus.
I remember seeing you. You all arrived at Singapore airport as I was leaving, and we sort of met in the corridor. I think Michael, yourself, the rest of the team that had taken part in that the Maldives.
I know, it's an extraordinary thing. In fact, there's two things about that one of them changed my life with Janet, and the other one changed my diving life. But I was involved with all like the technical bits and really the non-fun bits, and there was a group of filmmakers on board, and I remember watching them, and I thought, I'd love to have a go at video. So I remember speaking to, I got very friendly with the guys from Scuba Zoo, amazing bunch of guys, but also with a guy called Leandro Blanco, a Spanish videographer and an amazing talent. And, he said, do you enjoy diving? I said, I love it. He said, do not ever take up video because it will ruin your diving forever. You'll see like half that you should see. You'll become so obsessed with the camera. That's all there'll be in life. He said, look, if you love diving, don't do it because you'll never love diving again.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, I must admit, me and my GoPro, I feel exactly the same way. Yeah, sure.
Well, it can be all-consuming, but I know the liberating feeling I get when I don't take a video camera with me, when I'm just swimming around all the stuff you see and everything else, and it's all embedded in your mind. So, it's all good. Yeah. But the other thing that happened was it was a great success, and the Maldivian Tourist Board loved us. We got invited back the following year as a bit of a promo thing. So we got invited back on this great junket, and I was able to take Janet. So for her 40th, we went to the Maldives, and we got comped at like the Four Seasons. Then we went out on this. We stayed at a place called the Taj Kroll, which is a beautiful resort, and everything else. And so after that, Janet said, "Well, this is the standard from now on for dive holidays."
Now, just back a bit, because that Maldives expedition that you were on, they were using the Atlantis rebreathers. Now, go back. The rebreather training that you had, you went to Germany to the Draeger Works in Lübeck.
Yes, yeah, that's right. Oh my God, what an experience that was. So I went over there to do a technician's course, and also because I put together the manual in English for training on the recreational training on the rebreather, and the instructor manual, based in part on the, my PADI experience that I have and my AND experience I had. So because I'd written the manual, they basically had me running the instructor course to the other UATech reps and representatives that were from all over the world. So there was the guys there from Hong Kong, Singapore.
Paul Nielsen.
Paul Nielsen, of course, yeah. And then oh my God, I can't think of his name in a minute. That little Chinese guy from Hong Kong, can see his face now. It's funny as, the guys from France, Germany, Europe, and whatever. So I ended up actually running the instructor course there. But also the mine clearance divers decided, or Draeger decided, that it would be good for them to give us part of their training. And oh my God, that's just the most intense, extraordinary underwater experience I'd ever have.
Where did you do it all? In the Draeger Works?
In Draeger Works, basically, it was like a big shipping container. So we did it there. We did go and actually do a couple of ocean dives from Lübeck itself. We went down, we got onto what I thought was an old RNLI lifeboat. And we went out I think we dived to about 12 or 13 meters, dropped over the side, ripping current, no veers. When we got to the bottom, we were diving on top of mussel beds. So we did a couple of dives there just so they were happy that we'd use the things in the ocean, the potential instructors use them in the ocean, et cetera, in being supervised by the mine divers. But the pool training was the funniest thing because we're in dry suits in a pool, 4 people and 3 rebreathers. And basically you go one corner here, one corner here, one corner here, and somebody without one. And basically you got to swim 10 meters, grab the rebreather, open it up, couple of breaths, close it off, go to the next one. And then you've got basically 4 of you going round and round in a circle. And I just thought, this is just going to end in tears. No one is able to do it. Till I worked out that they weren't watching us. And then it became very easy because as we swam up to the rebreather, I just grabbed the shark regulator, which was the alternate air source attached straight to the cylinder, took a couple of breaths on that, charged myself up on the rebreather, off the rebreather, on the next one. As soon as everyone saw what I was doing, they were all at it. So if you got in strive and you literally ran out of puff, the little shark was there to save your life.
Yeah.
They were very impressed that we all managed to go 5 times around without anyone surfacing.
How long were you at Drager for?
We were there for 10 days.
Right.
Yeah.
And this, of course, because the Atlantis was going to be the rebreather that revolutionized the recreational industry, wasn't it?
I know, that's an amazing thing, isn't it? I may have heard that once or twice before, and I've been sucked into this cavern of investments as well with this rebreather that's going to change the world. The Fibian, which, lived up to its name, it was a fib. And then we've got the Atlantis, and then we have the Drager, and then sadly the Hollis Explorer. So closed circuit rebreathers and I have a long and very expensive history. It's been good fun, but yes, it's a bit like, when someone first owns a boat, it's a similar experience.
Yeah. But just back to Drager again with the training. So because at the time, people that were manufacturing the various rebreathers were also offering their own sort of training programs, weren't they? And
yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, when they went into how they designed the rebreather, how it was made, the equipment that went with it and everything, it was incredibly thorough. It was amazing, the stuff I learned. Max Hahn, in fact, did my certification. So the stuff I learned from him, Dr. Max Hahn, about decompression theory and blood gases and et cetera, it was an extraordinary time. I really loved it. It was 10 very intense but fun days, except for there was 5 minutes a day that was just a bit awkward. And that's the 5 minutes where we used to have to stand, hands by our sides, head down, in front of Herr Drager's grave and have a 3-minute silence.
Really?
Yes, because his grave was on the factory there.
Right.
Yes.
So everyone in the factory was... Everybody. Yeah. 3-minute silence every morning before you start work. Wow.
I know. It's a funny ritual.
Does that still take place?
I'm assuming it does.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also made a bit of a faux pas when I was looking at their history wall, and there was a bit of a gap in the 40s, but we need some. It was a golden moment. I couldn't resist it.
Yes, yeah. Because this, of course, Hans Hass was that was his sort of go-to rebreather, wasn't it? The Drager 02 rebreather. But that would have been a tremendous experience.
It was terrific. I loved it. I learned an extraordinary amount. And, even just, every bit about it was good. Yeah.
So back in Australia, you were running the rebreather programs. So Drager kept coming out with various sort of new models, didn't they? The Dolphin, the Ray.
That's it, the Ray, there we are. That's well done, Strikey. Yes. That was an offshoot of a Japanese rebreed.
Oh, the Fino.
The Fino, that's right.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Oh God. Anyway, yeah, the ray was definitely wasn't a ray of sunshine, that one.
No, that Fino, they used to have sort of very small young girls walking around the Asian dive shows wearing the Fino.
I know.
Just like a little backpack.
It was a phenomenal thing. You couldn't even get half a proper breath out of it.
No.
You know, as a fat Aussie bloke. It was
so
the lung volume in it was like about 2 liters or something. It was tiny. Yeah.
And so with Andy, you were still running Andy back in Australia.
Yeah, we carried on. We carried on till about 2000 or just before 2000, I think. And then when Paddy brought out their nitrox programs, that was sort of a bit of the death knell for us, because as an agency, people went with Paddy for nitrox.
Yeah.
And then eventually Paddy brought out their technical training programs. So it was just simpler to transfer over to that. And I've got to say, the diving bit was good fun and the training bit was good fun, but running a training agency isn't fun at all. And I don't envy anyone that does it, because it's a pretty,
well, you've got to presumably all of the teaching materials, the student books, the student materials, you've got to not just police, but actually in many instances, I would imagine, right.
And it's all admin. You need very good, IT skills, which really isn't me either. Admin thing is definitely not me, and that's probably the worst thing. My worst trait. I'm hopeless in admin, so generally I try and avoid it at all costs. And then you don't get to dive much, so there was nothing in it.
But it's so you gave up or divested yourself of Andy, but you were still carrying on with the technical diving.
Yeah, so we're still doing a heap of technical diving, and still doing heaps of technical training, and that was fantastic, because obviously we've got some amazing diving on our doorstep and the ability to train on our doorstep as well, because as you know, access to dive sites are 5 minutes away, or deeper sites are 10 or 15 minutes on the boat.
Yeah.
So, it was amazingly well set up for technical training, and it was exciting. And then we were traveling around, New Zealand, diving the Lemmentoft, diving some of the wrecks there. And then there was a super enthusiastic bunch in New Zealand, Peter Mesley and all his guys that were diving over there, and it just really took off everywhere, and it really grabbed everyone's imagination. It was fantastic.
And then you were so through the shop, Dive Centre Manly, you're also organising a lot of special interest trips, aren't you, overseas?
Correct. Yes. Yeah. No, it. What's not to love about overseas dive travel? That's all I want to say. I mean, we obviously got great sites here in Oz, but also we're so close to some amazing diving. I mean, on our doorstep, you've got, New Guinea, Southeast Asia, we've got Micronesia, you've got shipwrecks galore, shipwrecks everywhere, if you like rusty metal, amazing reefs, something for everybody, really stuff for everyone. Great cultural experiences, extraordinary stuff, Fiji, for example. Oh my God, probably the best shark dive in the world in Benga Lagoon. Great place to go. Yeah, amazing stuff. Fantastic little
all
woods.
the places that you've been to, Richard, what's your favourite?
Now I get that a lot. I think I've got to split it up a little bit. So I think for reef diving and diversity, I'd have to say New Guinea. I'd even say New Guinea over Raja Ampat. So definitely New Guinea. For big fish would have to be, the Galapagos or Cocos. For shipwrecks, I can't go past diving on the Odyssey and Truck Lagoon. It's just like one of my favourite trips. I just love it. We've been doing it for like 20 plus years since they first started operating in 2000, and we just love going back there. And let me just think. So we've got reefs, wrecks, fish, big fish. Macro stuff would have to be Lemby. So for macro diving, outside of Chowder Bay in Mossman, just down the road from me, would have to be Lemby for macro diving.
What was the other? What was the other one? Not Chris.
Cocos and
where was the atomic tests?
Oh, Bikini.
Bikini.
Yeah, Bikini Atoll.
Yeah.
I've got a trip there in July, and I think we're actually going to go. I think it's going to run.
That's next July, obviously.
That's next July, yes, yeah. I dived there 10 years ago,
Right.
maybe 11 years ago now, with John O'Brien. There was just two of us on the island when we went there. There was one more trip after us, and then the island shut down. I think about 5 years ago now. They're running liverboard boats out there out of Quedgelin or Moderator.
Why did it shut down?
Basically, the global financial crisis happened, the first one, and the trust that was running the airline went broke.
Oh.
So basically, it just stopped.
Yeah.
Mm. But what an amazing experience. I mean, the Saratoga has to be seen to be believed. And also the other wrecks out there, great submarines, the Abagon. There's some extraordinary. Arkansas, there's the Nagato, the great, Japanese destroyer, just fantastic.
What sort of depth?
The bottom of the lagoon is pretty much 50, 55, 60, something like that. So most of the wrecks sit up a bit. So you're looking 40, 42, 45 to 55 or 60. There are a couple of spots where you can go a bit deeper, but you don't really need to unless you want to stick your computer in the sand or something.
Do they have all of the appropriate gas there now? Or?
Yeah, they do on the boats, yeah. So when I dived it, there were only two gases. One was air as a bottom mix, and then they had surface supplied, hanging from the boat, 80% nitrox.
Yeah.
So that were your two choices when you went there. Air and 80% nitrox. Didn't matter what you wanted to do, that was it. So you just hung on the trapeze under the boat on the 80% and just did as you were told.
Wow. Well, hopefully the restrictions on travel will ease soon.
Oh yes.
You've got to do that.
I don't want to make too much of a Nostradamus prediction, but I would imagine that by January, February, we'd be able to leave our island without too much trouble to come back in.
Now, let me just move along a bit now. The one of your other great interests is marine conservation. And where you're located, and certainly I'm very biased here, but Shelley Beach and Cabbage Tree Bay, that must rank as one of the world's very best shore diving sites. And
it is, and given its proximity to a major city, like 7 miles, from Sydney, it's just extraordinary. And it is an extraordinary place. For those that don't know it, it's a bay just outside of Manly. It's a beach that's on the eastern seaboard of Australia, but actually faces west. So there's almost a complete circular bay, and Shelley Beach, if you were standing on the shore, you're looking actually out to sea across Shelley Beach. So it's protected in most weathers. But the great thing about it was in the mid-90s, we started lobbying to get it as a marine reserve. So eventually we got a no-take aquatic reserve, I think in 2002, 2003. And it's just coming in leaps and bounds. It's just unimaginable, the fish life in this harbour site. I mean, Strike, he goes there, almost every week, and we go there a lot. So right on our doorstep, we've got, Sydney's only no-take aquatic reserve of any meaningful size. And when I say meaningful size, this thing is only a square kilometre. But it's an absolute jewel, and it just really shows you what you can do if you can get a little bit of protection.
Yeah, I remember when Reiner Rainer was the first publisher of Asian Diver magazine, and he was making one of his first trips to Australia. And I eventually persuaded him to come diving at Shelley Beach, which he was loath to do because of the cold waters in Australia, compared with what he was used to throughout Asia. And I remember before we went in, I was being a really obnoxious turd and said, well, what do you want to see? You know, we've got this, 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 and this. And he said, I'd like to see. We were ticking off. It was like a shopping list. And when we exited the water at the boat ramp, the regulator dropped out of his mouth and he said, I cannot believe we're within 6 miles of an international airport. He said it was just truly amazing. We saw everything. We saw Port Jacksons, we saw Wobbegongs, the big Eastern blue gropers came up to say hello. It was marvellous. Yeah.
I mean, it's an amazing resource. And for the people of Manly, you know, now we have hundreds of people swimming there every day. You know, we have snorkelers all over the place. You know, it's obviously popular, you know, with scuba diving. We've been able to build our business around it. It's just phenomenal. It's just a fantastic resource. And it's unequivocal proof that if you really want to make a difference, you just need to protect somewhere. It doesn't have to be large, but it has to be some. And you just have to say, okay, we're going to stop all manner of fishing or extraction here and just leave it for the fish. And it's
you had a lot of problems, though, didn't you, in terms
loads of resistance in the early days from, you know, the local dive shops, which is strange. You'd think the shops would be behind it, but they were all against it because at that time they were selling spearfishing equipment, encouraging spearfishing. And also there was this great mistrust of if you protect it, then eventually it'll be regulated and you'll have to pay a license fee and there'll be some restrictions over its use, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas if we just leave it as it is, we can just use it. You know, and obviously, you know, with the benefit of hindsight, everyone can see the flaws in that argument. But I knew right from the very beginning, yeah, there'll be some restrictions and we probably will have to pay. And we do, and we're you know, no one else in Sydney pays to use their local dive site except us. But by God, it's worth it. Yeah. You know, when you look at what we've got. And also it costs a lot of money. You know, it costs a lot of money to look after all that. So it's not completely for free. So the council and the need to get some income to help pay for all the facilities we've got now. They've got the divers tables, divers that own the area and all sorts of stuff. So, you know, the money at the end of the day is, you know, it's just a very small argument compared to the resources we've got. It's amazing.
Yeah. It's we're getting very close towards the end of the session, but very, very briefly, for the benefit of those that doubt the existence of the fortune-telling parrot in Singapore, that's been the subject of an expedition for the past few years that people attending the ADEX show have been looking for. Richard's one of the very few people to have actually seen and met the fortune-telling parrot.
Absolutely. And it's become, I think, a thing now of myth. But for many years, when I was first, you know, going to ADEC with striking, going down Racecourse Road and looking for our little fakir was a great joy of our life. Yeah. And if I've got time, I'm not sure, but I'll just quickly tell you how it goes. So basically, you go and see our little fakir. He has his parrot there in a cage. You give him $5 sing. He asks you your name. He then lays out all these cards on the table, takes the parrot out the cage, puts it on top of all the cards, then gets his head next to it and he goes, David, 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 David. At which point the parrot runs up and down, picks up a card, lo and behold, that's your fortune. I mean, what more accurate way of guiding your life? The $5 sing, you know, forget seeing life coaches, $5 sing, this is all you need. So Striking and I have had great fun with that. We also have fallen prey to anyone in Singapore that says they'll tell you fortune. About it told by computer, joss sticks, you name it, we've done it. But the fortune-telling parrot is the pinnacle of fortune-telling. I urge you when you're there to look him up. I've not seen him for a few years, and I don't think he's been sighted.
No,
either.
no, I think he might have retired or died. I think the parrot might have turned up its little toes.
He's croaked it.
Yeah.
Could be a Monty Python sketch, couldn't it, almost?
So we must be perilously close to the end
Perilously.
of the
7:31.
Yeah.
We haven't been given the wind-up, though, so that's marvellous.
Well, I think Nora's obviously gone missing in action.
Yeah. Normally the shepherd's crook had come across and whooshka.
Yeah.
Oh, no. The sword of Damocles is upon us, Strikey.
Yeah, there she is.
Yeah.
No, I have not gone missing. I just I was a bit astonished and amazed by the story of that infamous parrot of yours.
Oh, the parrot. You will love
Yes.
the parrot.
Yes. So most probably by 2022, you could get your fortune read again, I'm sure.
The last one wasn't very good for me. They said, my life was going to change last year. Lo and behold.
My
Lo
last
and
fortune
behold,
was
thanks to the pandemic, it remained exactly the same.
my last fortune with the parrot said Strikey was my filial son, so I don't know how we deal with that.
Okay.
Great parrot, though.
Thank you once again. It's that was an absolute pleasure to be able to chat with you, and hopefully I'll see you again fairly soon in the water.
Yes.
Or
Next
for
week.
coffee and egg and bacon rolls afterwards.
Oh, no, next week you're having your tooth done. Maybe the week after.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Nora,
All right.
thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you so
Nora.
much. Thank you
And
so
thanks,
much.
poor suffering audience.
Thank you so much, Richard. Thank you so much, David, for taking your time. Very engaging and quite informative dialogue, I must say. It's very entertaining. Thank you so much. And for everybody who's listening, please do stay tuned for the next session, which is happening really shortly at around 6 p.m. And that will be on the Dive Media. So do stay tuned, just a few minutes more. And so once again, David, Richard, hope to really catch you in person and most probably bring you to go and find that parrot soon.
We'll find it together.
Okay.
Your future is safe with us.
Okay.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you. We're
you.
now leaving. See you.
Bye.